There's been a lot of talk recently about what's going to happen in the UFC's lightweight division. Is Ilia Topuria going to get the title shot against Islam Makhachev? Not so fast. Technically speaking, the rightful number one contender is Charles Oliveira. After UFC 309, Charles Oliveira became the number one contender who is going to face the winner of UFC 311. Arman Tsarukyan never fought on UFC 311, but his number one contender title was taken by the UFC. Arman has to work his way back up for another title opportunity. The UFC is not happy with Arman Tsarukyan. He has to earn his way back to a title shot. Charles Oliveira earned his way back to a title shot with his victory over Michael Chandler at UFC 309. Seems pretty simple, but the thing is, not a lot of people are excited about the prospect of Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev rematching. Chael Sonnen, one of the biggest names in MMA media, one of the biggest names in the UFC, one of the most influential people in all of mixed martial arts history, says, why do we want this fight? Because it wasn't competitive the first time. And it wasn't as competitive as we thought it would be the first time. That said, I don't think the rematch would be the same. I really don't. And I know Islam Makhachev is the pound for pound number one fighter in the world right now. I'm not going to say Charles Oliveira will beat Islam Makhachev in a rematch. I think he can beat him. I know he can beat him, actually. And I feel like a lot of people have forgotten because when someone loses, someone gets finished, history is rewritten. But when I think of Charles Oliveira, when I think of his title reign and his road to the title, I think of a BMF. And there's a lot of BMFs in the UFC. Max Holloway is the BMF champion, after all. Justin Gaethje is a former BMF champion. Jorge Masvidal was one. Nate Diaz was one. Dustin Poirier fought for that title, deservedly so. Volkanovski's won with the fights that he takes on short notice. Diego Lopez is certainly one with his heroics at UFC 303. There's a lot of BMS in the UFC. But when I think of Charles Oliveira at his best, I think of him as the sport's ultimate BMF. Now, the UFC's lightweight division is the BMF division. That's why we love that division so much. Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson in his day, Michael Chandler now. Those are some awesome, entertaining fighters who are brawlers, who entertain the fans in every single performance. They are the best of the best, the toughest of the toughest. And when Charles Oliveira was champion, he was going toe to toe with those guys and brawling with them. He brawled with Justin Gaethje and he submitted him. He beat him. He brawled with Dustin Poirier. He brawled with Michael Chandler that first time. He brawled with Tony Ferguson. And has anyone, if you think of those, a class of lightweights, those great lightweights, He's beaten them all. He submitted them all. Knocked out Chandler. But he's finished them all. He beat up Tony Ferguson pretty good. But Khabib never fought Tony. Charles gave us brawls with Dustin, finished him faster than Khabib did. Charles finished Justin faster than Khabib did. He exchanged with those guys. He brawled with those guys. And it was fun to watch. But at his heart, Charles Oliveira is a skill fighter. And he wanted to test his skills against Islam Makhachev. Who was the better grappler? Was it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Sambo wrestling? Which was the better discipline? Sambo won at UFC 280. UFC 300. He nearly submitted Arman Tsarukyan. He pulled down the shorts, got pretty lucky. Charles had 4 submission attempts in that fight. Do you think Charles doesn't get the finish in a 5-round fight against Arman Tsarukyan? I don't know. I think he would. He had Arman Tsarukyan in a lot of danger in a lot of different spots in that fight. And Arman prevailed, and Arman showed a lot of grit. But I still think Charles is the more skilled fighter of the two. But the thing about Charles is he goes for the finish, not for winning on points. But the Charles Oliveira who fought Islam Makhachev at UFC 280 is not the Charles Oliveira that we typically see. That's not the guy that fought Beneil Dariush. That's not the guy that fought Arman Tsarukyan. That's not the guy that fought Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson and Michael Chandler. Dustin Poirier has admitted it himself. Dustin Poirier, who has shared the ring, the octagon, with Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, believes that the Charles that fought him, the Charles that fought Dustin, would give Islam Makhachev the hardest night of his life. And I agree with that sentiment. The Charles Oliveira, who was the lightweight champion, you had to kill him to stop him. There was no stopping him. He'd get knocked down, he'd get bloodied, he'd keep coming until he finished you. He put so much pressure on these guys. He puts that pressure on Islam Makhachev. It's a whole different ballgame than UFC 280 was. He is capable of beating him. Because Charles is the ultimate BMF when he is at his best. Would he submit him? I doubt it. If you want to beat Islam Makhachev, you have to knock out Islam Makhachev. Ilia Topuria has that ability. Charles Oliveira has that ability. Justin Gaethje has that ability. But it has to happen. And it's a big ask and a big if. But Charles Oliveira possesses that pressure and that power. And he's a threat. Because Khabib always said that Justin hit him the hardest. Charles is the one that hits hardest in the lightweight division. That was proven when he knocked out Justin Gaethje. Submitted Justin Gaethje, knocked him down, submitted him. You know what I mean. When Charles hit Justin, Justin folded. And Charles' UFC 309 performance. was dominant against Michael Chandler, and we were shown his resilience again. We were shown his toughness again. He got eye poked and was getting hit in the back of the head in round five, and he came back, got up, got the takedown, got the control time, threw an eye poke and plenty of illegal rubber punches. Just shame that happened in that fight. But Charles is the ultimate BMF. UFC 317 is that fight happening? I think it's a good replacement if we can't get Tom and John. Doesn't seem like Ilya necessarily will get that shot immediately next. I don't think the UFC is in too much favor of that. Can Charles regain the lightweight title? Personally, I think if before Ilya Topuria came up to lightweight, I figured Charles would reclaim that title one more time when Islam Makhachev left. Now it's a different case. It's an uphill battle. But Charles has the tools to beat anybody. He gets cracked a lot. He comes back a lot. He's resilient. He has power. He is the UFC's greatest finisher in its history. Only time will tell. But Charles should be fighting for a title next, whether it's Islam Makhachev or Max Holloway. I'm really interested to see what's next for Charles Oliveira. Let me know what you think is next for the Bronx. Do you think Oliveira will fight Makhachev? Do you think he can beat Makhachev? What do you think of his chances against Holloway in a rematch there for the BMF belt? Where do things stand? The future Hall of Famer, Charles Oliveira. I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to the Interim Title Show. Follow us on Instagram at Interim Title Show. And thank you as always for watching.